you mentioned something about bai cai, right? The cabbage. And it could be a symbol, or it could mean wealth or good fortune, fa cai. The one on the right-hand side, that's the Chinese character. Fa cai means to make fortune, or to be prosperous, or to be wealthy, right? And bai cai, as you can see, the pronunciation is not that similar. So probably it's a symbol for good fortune, because that's what the Cantonese people, when they pronounce bai cai in Cantonese, it may have similar pronunciation as making fortune or be prosperous. So I'm not from that culture, that's why it's kind of foreign to me. However, Chester was so kind to find me the next picture. Okay, have you come across this kind of dish? This is edible. This is not hair. Okay. Okay. But the literal meaning, the literal name of this dish is called hair vegetable, because it looks just like hair. Okay, and it's called fa cai. And if you take away the tone, this is fa cai, this is fa cai. So you can see the similarity in the pronunciation. We do use this in my culture. We use this as a symbol of good fortune and to make money, or to be wealthy, or to be prosperous. And we don't eat this so often because it's kind of expensive. Okay, we do it only during the New Year's time. But I know a lot of vegetarian people, they would have this often. This is vegetarian, okay, because it's kind of vegetable. Have you seen? How many of you have seen it? How many of you from non-Chinese culture have seen it? No, okay. And for those of you who have seen it, does it mean the same thing as I understand it? Yeah? You speak Mandarin at home. Okay, identify yourself first.
Oh. My name's Catherine.
Catherine. Okay. So you feel the same way?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. It tastes good.
Okay. Now, and now that you know, we make a lot of symbolic meaning out of sound because of the phonetic similarity. Probably you can understand why a lot of people, when a lot of students especially, when they are, you know about the education system in Taiwan, right? You have to take entrance examination to get into high school. You have to take entrance examination to be admitted to a good college. So taking exam is a big thing in Taiwan. If you, in my time, not so much now, when I was a student, if we don't pass the entrance examination, unless we go into business or something else, that would be the end of my future, right? Because you need better education. So taking exam is a big thing in Taiwan. And if you stay until next, I would say April or May, you're going to see a lot of anxious parents. They will try to do everything to make sure that their kids, their children, will do well in the exam. So they will go to the temple and worship. And in particular, they would use a lot of things to symbolize that the children will have a successful exam. One of the things is this salary. A salary, the Chinese pronunciation is qin cai, and this qin is homophone with the character meaning diligent, to learn diligently, to study diligently. So they will use this qin, as a symbol to worship one of the gods. In last time we talked about the Taoism, not necessarily the Buddhism, but the Taoism. For example, in Xintiangong, not necessarily Xintiangong, Longshan-Si, the Dragon Mountain Temple in Wanhua, if you take the MRT, the blue line, there's one stop right there. And I highly recommend you to go there when you have free time, because they have night market and they have this temple, which is a culturally relic, beautiful. Especially if you stay until the Lantern Festival after the New Year. They have the biggest Lantern Festival in that temple. You see all kind of lanterns beautifully made. Okay, so you're going to see parents, anxious parents, preparing this thing to worship to the God who is in charge of your study. Okay, and the same thing, other than celery, you would have scallion, because scallion is pronounced as cong, and cong is a harmony with the word for being smart, 聪明. Okay, so you can see in the Chinese culture we use a lot of homophone to symbolize the thing that we think is important. And this, what is this? Garlic, not for Dracula. Okay, in my culture, this is the pronunciation is called 蒜. Okay, 蒜, and that's the same as a homophone with the verb to count, 算. Okay, that to count is to 算. For example, I can count how many people, 算一算, how many people. So it's a homophone with the verb to calculate or to do arithmetic, 算数. So that's why you would worship to the God this kind of food, so that you'll be good at math. Okay, at math. And then you have, what is this? What is this? Do you have it? Radish, yes. And the pronunciation is 菜头. That's actually the Southern Min pronunciation. And 菜头 is, again, a homophone with another term in Chinese. We say 好彩头, that means good omen or good, like a good omen, good symbol or something. So that's why you can see again, they are homophones of each other. And then lastly, we will have this. Have you seen this? Okay, no? Okay, some people have never seen it. So you are not here for 1 year yet. You're just new here, right? Okay, this is something we would eat every May, according to the lunar calendar. There's a long story behind, okay? If you are interested, you can go online to find out about the story. That's about an ancient poet, okay, who is so patriotic, but he was sentenced to death and people want to memorize him. So, they want to give him food even though he is dead. He was thrown into the ocean. So people try to think, how can I make sure he could get the food without, the food being eaten by the fish or anything in the water. So they try to wrap up the mochi rice. It's sticky, right? They wrap it inside the bamboo leaves and they wrap it. Trust me, it's not as simple as it looks. It's very difficult. I have tried to do it for almost 10 years, then I gave up, okay? When I look at my mom doing it, it was so simple, but when you actually want to do it, because we do it from not the rice that's already cooked, we do it from the raw rice, like the rice that you purchase, and it's not sticky at all. So to make sure that you wrap it and then you boil it, but nothing will come out. Of course, you could get very fancy, depending on what you want inside. You could have mushroom, meat, you name it, okay? As long as you think it's good. And this is called 粽子. Okay, this kind of thing is called 粽子. And the action to make this 粽子 is called 包, to wrap. So you want to 包粽子, that's the action. And 包粽子, if you just take the first two sounds, that would be 包粽, 包粽. Okay, so they are playing again the homophone game, except that this time 粽子 is actually, you don't have the retroflex for 粽, but for 中, for China, the character, you have to use 卷舌音 retroflex, 中, right? But they don't care so much. They think they are homophone. So you use the same sound, 包粽. 包 in another case would also mean to guarantee. So you would guarantee what? This is not middle. You guarantee that you would make it. You would get into what you want to get into, like getting into a good university or whatever. So if you buy a lottery ticket, and if the person say 保中, then buy it by all means, okay? Because nobody can really guarantee. But 保中 means simply guarantee that you will get it, okay? So they are playing again on the homophone, 保中 and 保中. Okay? So these are the things that you worship to the God. So language and culture has such a intimate, woven relationship, and usually you would think that linguists, people who study linguistics, will be interested in the language part, and anthropologists, people who are doing anthropology, will be interested in the cultural part. But actually you can see that they are so closely related, you can hardly separate them apart. Therefore, the study of linguistics or the study of language cannot be independent of culture. Okay? You really have to look into the meaning behind the language. And this is what, in your reading, Franz Boas said, language patterns are unconscious and provide access to unconscious cultural patterning, otherwise inaccessible to researchers or to users, to language users. Because all of this knowledge behind, they could be unconscious. Unless you're in the culture, it's so difficult for you to detect. And the same thing with Sapir. All those people, Boas, Sapir, and Wolf, they are in fact anthropologists to begin with, but they are also interested in languages. And people in linguistics nowadays get so much knowledge and so much inspiration from their teaching. That's why we always cite them when we are dealing with the language-culture relationship. Edward Sapir and Benjamin Wolf, they said language constitutes the means with which individuals think and determine cultural thought, perception, and worldview. Okay? I hope from those pictures that I have shown to you, you know more or less why we think this way, why we will use certain things to symbolize certain aspects that you need in life. Okay, so Sapir and Wolf, they later developed their idea into what we now call Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Okay, and if you are from the scientific background, of course you know what is the difference between a hypothesis and a theory. A hypothesis is like an attempt to gather the evidences you have seen and to come up with something that is testifiable. And as long as it's testified, then it becomes a theory. But according to the scientific method, if that's science, whatever theory has to be subject to further verification. As long as it's falsified, then you have to modify the theory and go back to the root again. So you start with your data, you have some hypothesis, and if the hypothesis is verified, you have a theory. But the theory will go back to undergo further verification, and then the loop goes on. That's what science is. That's what science is so different from the humanities or from the liberal arts. And we still call the Sapir-Whorf idea and hypothesis because nobody can verify it. What is their idea? You read down and then you tell me if you can verify this or what's your thought on this. Okay, so they want to search for isomorphisms between grammar and culture. They think grammar or language and culture has a one-to-one relationship, or that's kind of relationship, a one-way relationship. And their hypothesis has two versions. The weak version says language provides the means for thought and perception. So in other words, you think because you have language as a tool to facilitate your thinking and your perception. Okay? But it also comes in a strong version. The strong version says language conditions thought, perception, and worldview. So the only difference is one is to facilitate, the other one is to restrict or to constrain or to condition your thought. So up to now, people who believe in Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, they may still vary between the two versions. For example, I myself am a believer of the weak version because the strong version to me is too strong. Okay? And if it is so strong, why do we still call it an hypothesis? Okay? Another similar example or analogy to hypothesis would be like, what do you have first, the chicken or the egg? You cannot have a theory because it's always a loop. The same thing, how do you know whether it's language provides a means for thought or it's thought provides the means for your language? It could be the other way around. Do you get it? Okay. I'm going to use one example in a language that you are all familiar with, or at least that's a language we are speaking now, in English. For those of you who study English as a second language, or as a second language, or as a foreign language, to some of you, do you have problem learning the hypothetical mood of English? Like, if I were rich, I would do something. If I had been there, it wouldn't have happened. Okay? Do you have problem learning hypothetical sentences? No? Okay. Stefan, no. Why? In German, you have the same?
It's the same. I think it's even worse.
Oh. Okay. Tomomi, right? You have problem. Why?
It's confused to decide which word to use.
It's confused. Why? Because you have too many hypothetical in English. You have two forms. It's contradictory to the present or counterfactual, contradictory to the past, right? You have two kinds of hypothetical. But in Japanese, do you have two kinds?
Not really.
Not really.
No.
Okay. Okay, I know some people speak Chinese here. Nicole, you speak Chinese, right? How many hypothetical sentences do we have in Chinese?
It's not hypothetical.
Okay, 假如, if, right? That's contrary to the present. That's a hypothetical. Do you know? 如果. Or anyone who speaks Chinese in the room. Alan. Oh, okay. Francis. 万一, okay, very good. Yeah, 万一 is also a marker. Very good. Okay. Your Chinese is very good. Yeah. 要不然, okay, very good. So you have all this marker. But however, we only change the markers to express hypothetical meaning in Chinese. We don't change the verbs, right? In English, you have to say, if I were rich, meaning I'm not rich now. If I had done that, meaning I didn't do it in the past, right? So you have two kinds of hypothetical. But in English, in Chinese, you have all the markers, but you don't have the tense aspect difference, right? So that's why it's so difficult for people who don't speak English or who are not familiar with the English hypothetical to learn English. So there was one study by, I wouldn't call him a linguist. He's actually an anthropologist. So he went to Hong Kong and studied the hypothetical sentence with the Hong Kong speakers. The hypothesis was that he thinks since the Chinese speakers do not make a distinction between contrary to the present and contrary to the past. So the test goes as follows. Say if they don't have this language mean, that means they are not able to have any hypothetical thought. So the conclusion is he thinks that Chinese people will not be able to think hypothetically. Is that true? Okay, he came up with some result and he thinks his hypothesis was verified. Of course he was wrong, because even though we don't have the form, we have other ways. Your student, your fellow classmate just told us we have so many different markers. So even those different markers have different degree of hypotheticality. Okay, perhaps you don't know it, but they came from, those markers are developed historically from the past, and they usually have a meaning associated with them to begin with. But now probably you use them. But even with 如果, that's one marker, and 万一is more classical use. It's a classical use. You don't use, or you use in a written form, not so much in spoken form. Yeah, you can use it, but not so often. The most common one, the most neutral one would be 如果. 要不然 is also pretty oral, pretty spoken form. So we do have several markers to change, you know. And if this is the case, can I do another study saying that if there are not so many markers, hypothetical markers in English, so the English speakers do not have so many choice in life? Can I do that? That would be absurd, right? Okay, so that kind of study would not stand, and you know there's something wrong with the hypothesis, and they got the wrong result. However, what I want to say is, in every language, even though you don't have the form, you always have other options to achieve what you want to accomplish. Okay, always remember that. And this Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the only reason it remains a hypothesis is because you cannot verify, you cannot make it into a theory. Okay, and you may vary between the two versions, and depending on what you have come across or what study you have done. Okay.